Thank you, Perry. With your permission, I'll sit down. I'm recovering from being run down in the crosswalk, and we'll move right along. Is that rattling too much, or is it all right? As Perry's pointed out, we are going to deal with the city council candidates first from Ward 1, which there are 4. I have a very brief intro for each one of the 4 gentlemen you see seated at the table to my left. I will go through those quickly in random number fashion. We chose numbers so that nobody could be accused of favoritism and somebody being first, second, third, and fourth. Then I'm going to give each one of the 4 candidates 5 to 7 minutes to tell you why they think you should vote for them. Then I'm going to ask some questions, and I'm going to ask questions that are hopefully non-controversial, non-inflammatory. We ask all 4 of the candidates to each have 1 minute to answer that question, and then we'll move on. We'll have 20 minutes of questions, and we'll break, and we'll do the same thing with the mayoral candidates. So,
my name is Dave Harrison. Like I said, I've been in Missoula for about 3 years, and I've fallen in love with Missoula after living in New York. Missoula's the open space was a nice change. Like I said, my interest in running for office came when the Libertarian Party reorganized and started to get in the spotlight a little bit more. The Libertarian Party basically is a anti-government party. We don't feel that government is an effective problem solver. The more effective way to go is with people, neighborhoods, directly having input in the issues, eliminating the middlemen, like city council, which I realize is sort of ironic that I'm running for it, but we have to start somewhere. Its main focus is on individual freedom and responsibility. It sees government as a deterrent to achieving your goals as a neighborhood, as a community, as a city. There's a feeling that government in many ways causes resentment among people because the democratic process where a majority rules, you're still dealing with, say, 40% of the people being dissatisfied with a decision, and we just don't feel that that's the right way to go. There needs to be a smaller percentage of people making smaller scale decisions rather than citywide decisions. There should be decisions that apply specifically to the Rattlesnake or to specific parts of towns that have particular interests that are unique to that part of town. As far as an issue like zoning, it becomes a little more difficult for us to stick to our morals, our political conscience, as we call it, because sometimes you need a government to step in, and I think that's what I feel I bring to my candidacy brings to the issue is an openness to bypassing government. Even if we can't pull it off, there's some ideas there. Again, I use zoning as an example. Our ideal way of handling the issue would be gathering a consensus of opinion and trying to, if preservation of space turns out to be the consensus, to do that through private ownership, through organization of private funds, through an organization like the Nature Conservancy, where it is private monies that are coming in rather than, and buying up the land, rather than zoning it or creating off limits or restricting building. we see that as a more just way. It's not a council of 12 people saying you can or cannot do this. It's a more hands-on approach. And I think, like I said, I think that's what someone with a libertarian background would bring to. It's somewhat of a new idea. It's a way of circumventing the system that I think a lot of people are very unhappy with. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. I'm pleased that you didn't applaud, hiss or boo or anything. I would ask that you all refrain from applause or any other kind of comments from the candidates. Our second candidate is Bill Clark. Bill.
I'm Bill Clark. Not working. I'm Bill Clark.
Turn the switch
I've been doing
on the mic.
I'm not doing anything at all. There's something, but not much. I'm Bill Clark. I don't believe that government is an evil thing, although I frankly do admit that government scares me. So I don't advocate big increases in governmental powers. And in fact, if anything, I would advocate that government try to act more responsibly toward the citizens. In that vein, one of the things that I want to do as a city councilman is to find a regular way to communicate with people in the ward. I can't do this easily on the $400 a month that I earn as a city councilman, so I hope that initially I'll have some campaign funds left over if I get in. And I'll mail to everybody in the ward and ask them if they want to receive a newsletter from me. And this newsletter would discuss city council issues that are coming up, and I would offer some input on those issues and then ask for feedback. An example of how this could be used is like with the Rattlesnake Transportation Plan. Some of you may know that this is a plan that's designed to drastically improve the motorized transportation facilities in the valley. Some of this is going to be quite expensive. There'll be some federal funds for it and some state funds and some local funds for it. So not all of it's going to come out of SIDs of people in the valley, but a large amount will. Let's assume for the fun of it that $2 million is going to come out of SIDs of people in the valley. Well, I would say to people in this newsletter, for instance, you can go ahead and do the transportation plan if you want, which will, generally speaking, make us suitable for more development. Or if we're going to have to spend that $2 million anyway, we could decide to put it into a bond in the open space in the Rattlesnake, which would protect us from further development and make the Rattlesnake transportation plan unnecessary, or at least less necessary. The idea would be that we wouldn't have to have it. So, depending upon the feedback I get from something like this, it would help me make the decision that I need to make. And I intend to do this all the way throughout the 4 years because I don't think that the door-to-door experience I'm getting now is going to be good enough to, tell me what everybody wants for 4 years down the road. So I want this way of finding out what people want. A second goal that I have is to really get some kind of a handle on growth. I don't think it's enough to simply manage growth and plan for it. You can do a lot to alleviate the consequences of growth through planning and management, by requiring open space, by requiring landscaping, by trying to deal with density and so forth. But just like cramming too many people into a house or having too many members in your family, there may come a point at which too many people themselves are the problem. And so I think we have to find a way to deal with that issue. That's going to be a very difficult issue to deal with, but I have a legal background and I'm familiar with some ways in which it might work. I hope some of you saw the interesting what's this called? Op-ed piece in the paper last week by Jim Mazzara called "Haven't Our Local Leaders Ever Heard of Planning?" It's amazing to me to think that this was written that the conference he's talking about was written in 1977, because as I say, when I moved to the Rattlesnake, the planning office didn't have any conception at all of wanting to limit it. Our comprehensive plan up here at that time called for 5 times the number of dwelling units in the valley that we have now. Things like that just, told me that the government had no idea that people were concerned about what might happen to their city over time. Now, since any effort at limiting growth is going to have a very negative effect on housing prices, and it's going to make it very difficult for people to stay here, who live here now, as well as for our own kids to get started here, I'm also determined to find some way to do this which addresses the issue of affordable housing. such as it being in the city's interest not to approve any subdivisions that don't deal with affordable housing in some way, either by providing it themselves or providing some way to, fund it in the same way that you can set aside money for parks or whatever. Some of this may have to be done at the legislative level. I don't say that I can accomplish everything I'd like to accomplish in 4 years. And I'm also aware that I can't do anything if you people don't want me to do it. I'm just mentioning ideas that I have. If I send out my newsletters and if people like it, I'll continue to work on these things. If you don't, then I can't succeed because the city councilman has very limited power, and any authority I have is going to come from you. So that's basically what I have.
Thank you, Bill. Third candidate is Mike Bennett.
Well, before I get started here, I did want to thank y'all for coming, and also to thank the other candidates for coming. I think whether we agree with them or not, we should all appreciate anybody who's willing to go through this process of running for public office and putting all the time and energy into it that it does take to try to do a good job for the people that they want to represent. That having been said, can anyone here tell me the 3 most feared initials in the United States?
IRS.
IRS. You know what they should be? At least in Missoula? SID, as in Special Improvement District, the one form of property tax that has absolutely no limitations. Missoula in general, and the Rattlesnake in particular, are facing the possibility of special improvement districts for sidewalks, motorized transportation plans, non-motorized transportation plans, sewers, trees, and open spaces, among others. In one particularly ironic aspect of this, the tree plan would have us spending $250,000 a year to protect trees along city streets, while the sidewalk plan would have us spend $18 million, a large part of which would go to cut down trees along city streets.
Chad, give him credit for that.
I have here, you probably all recognize this. This is my property tax bill from last year. The city portion of that bill comes to $514.19. This may seem like a lot of money. I know a lot of us had sticker shock when we first had to start paying it, but I'm here to tell you that your regular property tax bill is chump change compared to what SIDs could cost you. If you own a corner lot, the Missoula Master Sidewalk plans could cost you $5,000. The Rattlesnake Transportation Plan that Bill alluded to earlier is estimated to cost $5 million. If you divide that evenly, no one says anything will be divided evenly, between Rattlesnake homes, it comes to $2,500 apiece. This homeowners association was founded in part to fight a sewer SID, which would have cost many of us here $20,000 over the course of the payout. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't want to come down on all SIDs. Some projects financed by SIDs are worthwhile, and some SIDs, like the one to maintain Pineview Park, allow neighborhoods to do things that are worthwhile and have the support of the vast majority of the people paying the bill. But because of the way they're structured, there's a real danger of abuse if the people who happen to be in charge of them have an agenda to push. Once the city council approves an SID, it takes a 75% protest by affected property owners to kill it. From the standpoint of someone pushing a pet project, this is much preferable to a bond issue where you need a majority approval. In the case of an SID, you don't need anybody's approval. All you need to do is find a small minority who either can't or won't file a formal written protest to it. And efforts are underway to make this even easier. The new water quality district that's been formed is seeking authority to override even a 100% protest on sewer projects, which would take away any incentive the government might have to keep costs reasonable. Now, I may be horribly old-fashioned, But I have a real gut problem with any system that allows the government to proceed with a project that's actively opposed by 3/4 of the people who it's supposed to be serving. And what can we do about it? Well, short of sending different people to the legislature and going through the process at Helena, the main thing we can do is to put people in charge here in Missoula who don't see it as a lever to extract money from our wallets. I've said in writing, and I'll say again here in public, that I will not vote for any SID or any taxing district that doesn't have the solid approval of a majority of the people who will be footing the bill. So the first thing we need to demand from our council members is that they speak for us, they listen to us and represent our wishes, rather than dictating to us whatever agenda it is that they might wish to push. The second thing that we should demand of our council members is that they think creatively on our behalf, even where this means questioning the wisdom of the bureaucracy. I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean. The first is the potential development of Mount Jumbo. I don't think anyone, even the landowners, want to see Mount Jumbo turned into a parade of homes. But the same property owners, some of the property owners, do want to turn a profit on their land. And if you read the paper, you'll surely have read that we face a choice between buying them out or seeing bulldozers replace the elk on the side of the mountain. Well, maybe it'll come down to that. And if it does, I vote to save the elk. But I don't think the solutions to these problems always have to come out of our wallets. Before we rush to pay building site prices for grazing land, we should consider that the city has other options to address building on areas such as Mount Jumbo. For instance, you can't put a septic system in any area with over a 25% slope. Without a septic system or a sewer, you can't build. Well, where is it written that the city has to provide sewer lines to anybody that wants to develop a hillside? The answer is, it isn't. And it's a heck of a lot cheaper for the city to say no to sewer lines than it is to buy out land. A second example has to do with our fire protection. The city's mandate to staff the Gilbert Street Station expires this December. Okay. Last year, a proposal was made to the city to provide a compromise which would have funded a new station in the Upper Rattlesnake. That was turned down by Al Sampson because it would have violated the idea, it would have put a rural station in the city limits. Despite the fact it would have saved taxpayer dollars and provided permanent protection. I want to be your representative so that I can truly represent your views, so that I can bring creativity and common sense to the process of doing so, and so that you can have a vote on council to see that we are not made victims of either grandiose and expensive visions or fossilized bureaucratic inertia. Thank you very much.
Norm Laughlin, and for those of you who do not know it, Norm is the current incumbent. Norm?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think they knew who I was. Thank you for attending, Harry and your staff. Thank you for putting this thing all together. Thank you again for your patience. So I would like to bring you up to date on some things that I was asked to some time ago, and I have decided that tonight would be the most opportune time. Some time ago, I'd given a thought to writing a letter to our editor regarding the vote and reason relating to the rattlesnake zoning. I've become aware of this meeting and opt to make the reason or explanation in person. First, I believe then as now that there was two issues, permanent versus interim zoning, and I've stated that many times in public. All those people involved, from constituents, OCD staff, and many others, had just ended 2.5 years of trying to zone the rattlesnake and arguing, and still no actual number came forth regarding density units. One time I was told by the residents that is a low and high area in regarding to the numbers. So somewhere in between these figures is okay. Then the next week it would be a total different figure. Then after a council person asked, would they accept one density unit in 10 acres? And some residents jumped on that figure as the gospel. So the conversation only proved no solution in sight with the continuation of interim zoning. I believe interim zoning only creates a field to argue and nothing gets settled. Second issue. The two density figures, 542 I believe it was, and versus 614. The 542 figure was and is fictitious. Also, I believe it had 542 been accepted, our city would have been liable in a lawsuit that could have meant $100,000 to settle, as much as that. That was advised to me by some attorneys in town. And out of that, that would have come out of the general fund, which is our pocket, the taxpayers' pocket that we've been referring to tonight. Yet the 614 figure was high, and I agree, but it had been accepted by other people, and it was so stated at various meetings of the council. And whenever the 614, or whatever the 614 was, it was a starting point and could have been adjusted up or down. And with interim zoning, you would not have had that chance, I do not believe. If we had all owed or owned 1 in 10, or if we had allowed 1 in 10, or even 1 in 5, in order to pay for the streets, infrastructure, etc., we would have had to have outside the area to pay. And I don't think we were willing to go that route. Somewhere along the line, I think we're a little prouder than that. I have a problem going to other people to pay my debts. And I have a problem to ask them for this type of help. Walkways, green paths, etc. I've already in the past voted to stop paths other than sidewalks in front of the house and not down the back. And I have problems supporting any type of trail system or walking unless it's on the street through neighborhood. Many of you people have contacted me and said, Norm, some of that property for the walkway, greenway, etc. is going to be coming. One person even said within 5 feet of their bedroom. I voted against a 30 feet within a front room area at one time. I sure am not going to vote for one within 5 feet of a house. If you wish to protest on a sidewalk phase, let us know. For if you don't, then when the city staff presents the project to us at committee meeting, and they say only X number of protests, then that is the information we have to rely on. But if you contact us personally, it gives us a better idea of the situation. And before I close, I wish to make one more statement about no growth or limited growth in Missoula. The information I have is dated August the 26th, and it's a letter to me. In 1980, Boulder, Colorado, was approximately the same size as Missoula is now. During the 1980s, Boulder grew at about 2% a year because of legislative limits on development, which put 2% as a cap. Missoula's historic growth rate for the past 30 years has been 2% a year. Boulder instituted a program to require the construction of affordable housing as part of all residential development. In 1991, the Planning Office of Boulder looked at 1990 census data and took an inventory of their housing stock to see how they were doing. Boulder found that 7% of its housing stock was valued at less than $75,000. From 1980 to 1990, Boulder's grade and high school population declined 16%. Their analysis of the cause, housing prices had forced families to leave town. So I guess no growth is fine if you want to go to Drummond to visit your grandkids. It takes money to run a town. The Supreme Court says we cannot deny people to build on their land or develop their property. I will listen to the city attorney no matter what person sits in that chair. He's the legal aid or legal side of the city. I am not. I do not pretend to be.
Norm?
Yeah, time? Okay. Thank you.
I want to thank all four of the gentlemen. Again, what we'll do now for the next 20 minutes, we'll ask one question which all four candidates will have 1 minute to respond to. And we'll try to monitor that time frame. Questions that are addressed to specific individuals or that are highly inflammatory, that nature, I won't ask. I think those should be asked by the folks who have that interest of the individual people after the meeting, or you can call them and find out that kind of specific information. So, with that in mind, first question I have, and again, I'll ask the candidates to respond in the order that they have already spoken. First Dave, then Bill, then Mike, then Norm. First question says, many pressing issues are facing the Rattlesnake Valley. For example, zoning, sewering, motorized and non-motorized transportation plans, sidewalk plans, etc. If the Rattlesnake citizens indicate a clear mandate of their positions on these issues, will you be responsive to and supportive of these positions, or will you pursue a different agenda? For example, if the citizens indicate they do not want a motorized transportation plan other than maintenance of the existing infrastructure, will you actively support this position? Dave?
As I stated in my opening, my political beliefs are very strong in letting the people decide. And I regret the fact that it would even have to come to a city council, that it couldn't be handled internally by neighborhood organizations. But to answer the question, most definitely would act upon a clear consensus. Of course, a clear consensus is a hard thing to come by, but I would do my best to try to dig that out, whatever it would be, and try to compromise as much as possible. I think that's a big key, is the ability to compromise on certain issues. Nothing, or very few things are clear cut. All of the issues stated in the question are confusing. So I think that's our biggest task on any issue, is to find out what specifically the people want done.
Thank you, David. Bill?
Sorry.
Yes, I also would want to do what the people want me to do. But I just want to point out something that I think you need to realize. Most of the plans that we're facing right now are due to growth. In other words, the necessity for the sewer, the idea of a sidewalk plan, which is to try to keep some availability for people to be able to feel safe when they're trying to commute near roads. The transportation plan in general, the non-motorized transportation plan, all of these things would not be necessary if we were not pushing the limits of our natural area here in Missoula. These are all, I think, the need to purchase open space and so forth, these are all consequences of growth. So if we can't find some way of dealing with the growth issue, then you're going to have to face how realistic is it to not, for instance, vote to put in a sewer at some point, even if it's going to cost you $10,000 to $20,000. So yeah, I don't favor doing these things either, but these things are not necessarily being done in a vacuum. You have to look at what's forcing them, and a lot of growth is forcing these issues. If I'm being clear on this, I hope you see what I'm saying. Like, if there weren't so much development in the Rattlesnake, the sewer wouldn't be necessary. But as we get more and more development up here, then the demands for water quality mean we have to start doing something about it. The same thing is pushing the transportation plan. So that's why I say that to get some kind of a handle, get some kind of a legislative handle on dealing with growth is important. And you've got to realize that a 2% growth rate will double the city in 35 years. So 2% sounds like an awfully small number, but it's not. It causes a rapid doubling of the city.
Thank you, Bill. Mike?
So this one I could refuse that, but I'm going to pass it. Try this.
Well, that wasn't quite so bad. In answer to that question, that is the main reason I'm running, to steal a phrase from Ross Perot, the people here are the owners, and their wishes are what count. I'm willing to live with anything that's decided by a clear majority of the people in the city, even if it isn't necessarily what I would like to see happen. And I would do my best to see that those majority wishes are carried out in the most straightforward, efficient way possible.
Thank you. Norm?
Three sides to every... Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. You gotta use the mic.
You can't record it on there without it?
That's problem.
You can?
Yeah, it's okay.
Three sides to each issue. Proponent, opponent, and the legality of the issue. If a certain amount of people want project A and it's illegal or it's unqualified or we can't produce it, then I would never expect any council person to go for it. If it is an honest issue and it meets those type of requirements, for those of us who lean heavily on the attorneys, if they say yes, it is legal and we can do it. I've been married for 30 years, and there's been a lot of times when I've asked my wife, can I do this? And she says, no way. As far as I'm concerned, that's the legal issue in my house. And I'm not saying that as a joke. I'm saying it's common down to earth fact. Not everybody comes forth with a legal issue, and we have to act accordingly. We can't please everybody.
Thank you, Norm. Second question for the four gentlemen says, if elected, what will you personally do to assure the continuation of local TV coverage in the valley? David?
As far as local TV, I think local TV is one of the greatest media things that we have. It allows for many different points of view and gets away from some of the agendas that different radio stations, different TV stations have. And I think the main thing we can do for local TV is the same thing that's pushed along programs like National Public Radio, American Public Radio, is the $10 every 3 months that you can send to them, whatever you can send to them, and letting them know what you're interested in, what you'd like to see, and keep in touch with them as much as you would anyone else that you have a vested interest in.
Thank you, Bill.
I'm confused. Is that question about keeping KPAX and KECI on the air, or is it about putting MCAT on the air?
Just keeping KPAX and KECI available.
Oh, okay. It's probably unfortunate that Les Hilliard couldn't have been invited here tonight. I guess he's a large part of the reason why this whole thing is even an issue. I spent quite a while talking with Bill Sullivan the other day at KECI about KPAX, with the problem that is being faced. I think it's totally unacceptable that Cable Montana takes quite a number of views it does toward our ability to choose what we want to watch. One of the reasons why we can't get MCAT up here is because Les Hilliard wants the right to censor whatever comes over the station. And then because he's not simply acting as a common carrier, but asserting the right to want to also be a censor, he then gets out of the
government guidelines that would shield him from liability, so he wants the city to give him a $10 million insurance policy. So Hilliard creates the problem and then wants the city to solve it. And I think he's also probably a large part of the problem that's going on with KCI and KPAX. On the other hand, KCI and KPAX have not at this time made it possible so that you can pick up their stations very well in the Rattlesnake without cable. So they are somewhat beholden, I think, to Cable Montana for providing them with a market they wouldn't otherwise have. But I do support a resolution of this issue. I would urge a boycott of Cable Montana if it came to that, to force them to deal in good faith with KPAX and KECI.
Thank you, Bill. Mike?
Maybe we can cooperate with each other. I honestly don't know what powers the city or a council person has to influence that particular issue, and I also don't know the truth of what's been going on in those negotiations. But I do know, as a businessman, that where you're buying a service or a product from someone, you don't worry about where they go to get it, what their particular problems are in getting it. They're the person selling it to you, and you're the customer, and they're the ones you hold accountable. In the case of Cable Montana, if they don't provide a service, they're very vulnerable to market forces. And there's nothing, some people might tar and feather me for this, but TV is not an essential item. And if people are not satisfied with the service they're getting or the product they're getting, you can write those guys, cancel my subscription until such time as I'm satisfied with what you're doing for me. I think that would solve the problem.
Thank you, Mike. Norm?
I think that's allergic to me. Two things. One, I think the city is going to have to develop a secret weapon to get Mr. Hilliard's attention. I have no idea what it's going to be. They've been negotiating with that gentleman for a long time before I ever came on the council. And there is a lot of merit into the fact that money controls what you get. I have went out to Radio Shack and verified what it would cost for a new TV antenna with a directional finder on the inside of the house. And I'm scared that if I don't pick anything up with it, that Radio Shack won't take it back. So that's my dilemma now. Somewhere along the line, the administration is going to have to come up with their secret weapon, whatever it may be. And at that time, it will be put to work. That's all I can say about it. But I do agree that money will make him listen.
Thank you, Norm. The next question, gentlemen, is how do you propose to deal with the zoning situation? Are you in favor of developing a new zoning proposal, staying with the one that has been proposed, or finding an alternative to regulate development? How important is the issue of zoning to you? David?
I guess the first thing I need to say on that issue is where I stand on the issue of development. I have to say my general leanings are against development and against growth, especially here in the Rattlesnake, where I feel it's a very unique area in that there's so much open space around the outside with such nice neighborhoods inside. That seems like it makes it a special place. As far as zoning goes, I think, like I stated in my opening, that it should be an issue that's handled internally and through private means. Groups like the Nature Conservancy, who rely on private funding, have been successful in other areas. That's not to say that it would be successful here. At the point that the private route falls through, if it were to fall through, I think it's one of the few issues where I would I would bypass my political beliefs to protect this area. And I think a zoning plan with as little development as possible is what I would lean towards.
Thank you, David. Bill?
I assume that here we're talking about the zoning of the Sunlight Lands, which was the 542 and 614 that Norm was talking about. That's a very difficult situation because City Council signed a contract years ago that they never should have signed. It had the term density rights in it. It was only used one time. It was never defined. It was never applied. It was never given a value. But that term by itself has led to all of the difficulty in getting the owners who bought up there to accept a zoning number that's less than what they think they bought. Another problem with that contract was that the city agreed not to ever charge them impact fees for their development. It was a very bad contract from the standpoint of the Rattlesnake and indirectly for the city. I would like to start with asking the landowners up there what numbers they would be willing to accept. And I think most people up there, since they plan to live there, want relatively low numbers. That would deal with all but about the 4 landowners who've consistently caused problems. And I think then I would simply go back to something more along the lines of what the OCD proposal was when they came up with the 542 figure. That's considered to be a funny number, I realize, because it involves some rounding up. But that was a figure that would probably be acceptable to a court. It would not get us sued and would be less than what they wanted. And I think we'd end up with a total number overall that was less than the 542. But I'd be willing to accept input from a lot of people all over again on this.
Thank you, Bill. Mike?
Yeah, I think we do need to have a resolution to the zoning issue here in the Rattlesnake for all concerns. We all know what we're dealing with and can get on with things. The only good thing about the council's killing the process is that it does give us a chance to go back and look at costs. And I don't think whether we end up with 614 or 542 allowable home size is nearly as important as determining what the costs involved are going to be. And I'm talking about the community costs, the roads, the schools, the sewers, etc., and addressing how those are paid for and who pays for them. And it certainly is my feeling that in any case like this, the people who benefit from those improvements are the ones who should bear the costs.
Thank you, Mike. Norm?
I was a DI for a while in the Army. That's why my skipper used to tell me, or the company commander used to tell me to get out on the end of the parade field. And if he could hear me whisper at 100 yards, I had a 3-day pass. And I used to get it once in a while. To date, for the Sunlight Lands, as of right now, there's between 75 and 80 building permits already going through the hopper for single-family homes in the Sunlight Land. To date, from January 1, there's 329 permits for construction valued at $21,256,718 for the city for that. I would like to have the Sunlight Land zone before the end of the year. As I said before, I hung my hat on the word permanent. I'm going to continue to hang my hat on the word permanent unless I'm shown otherwise by anybody that it should not be. Neighbors have a right to know what's going to be built next door. And they do not get that right with interim zoning. I don't care if it's 5 big houses on the whole property or 500. I'm hanging my hat on permanent zoning and not interim.
Thank you,
I think
Norm.
I've made that clear.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we have time for the city council candidates for one more question, and that question is, what poses the greatest danger to public health in the Missoula Valley, in your opinion? David?
have to answer this one on a personal basis. Since I moved here, I've suffered through the winters my own health with bloody noses and congestive problems, terrible flus, and it comes from the air quality, and I'm sure I'm not alone on that. To me, I think that's one of the, beyond just a public health and environmental health issue. I have to be honest, I don't exactly know how to control that. The burn bans sort of go against my political leanings. It seems somewhat intrusive. My closest shot at a resolution would be trying to get people to convert to different sorts of heating for their homes, but that has to be on a persuasive level, not a coercive level.
Thank you, David. Bill?
This is a very difficult question. I'm sure everybody here has a lot of ideas as to what their greatest fear is. I still tend to come back toward issues of growth, though, because I think that is, in an area like Missoula, which is bounded by the hills the way it is, in which we're going to have a limited ability to provide transportation infrastructure as we grow and so forth, I think that people are going to reach greater and greater levels of irritation with one another over time, and so our sense of community and our sense of community feeling for each other is going to disappear. We can do a lot, of course, to minimize the impacts. Like it used to be a lot, the air quality here probably used to be worse when there were teepee burners, so we've come a long way there. But I still think that there's going to be limits to this. Some of the things that a sociological text will mention as happening when a town grows is that you get increasing amounts of anonymity, reserve, distrust, impersonality, separation between people, lack of security, a blasé attitude toward the environment, transportation congestion, status ranking, and the development of racial, ethnic, and class conflicts. If these are consequences of growth in our society and we get too much growth, then I think you can see where the feeling of community between people is going to be going. It's not going to be here as well, and that's going to mean that we're going to have less liking of one another and more problems.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Mike?
Well, this may be a little bit on a different path, but one of the big problems I see in terms of public health is crime and is provision of emergency services. If you die of a heart attack or you are injured by somebody committing a criminal act, that's a lot more immediate, at least, than some of the other health issues. I think we took a large step towards resolving some of that when the city and the rural fire agreed to a joint response automatic mutual aid agreement to handle emergencies. And the city put on additional policemen to help deal with crime problems. And I'd like to expand on that to try to come up with a system where we can have adequate emergency services throughout the Missoula Valley, and where we can do our best to see that this stays a place where you don't have problems with being scared to walk down the streets. That's not to minimize things like the air pollution, the other problems, but these also affect public health.
Thank you, Mike. Norm?
Every time we open up a new well, we open up a potential danger spot for our aquifers. And that was proven here just a couple, 3 short years ago over in the university area when one of our wells became contaminated. The biggest thing for health is infrastructure that I think we need to protect our water supply, our drinking water supply, and that ends it.
Thank you, Norm. That concludes the segment of our program dealing with the candidates for city council. I'd like to thank each of the 4 candidates, and maybe we could all give them a hand of applause. Maybe we can take 1 minute and we'll ask Mayor Kemmis and Mark Healy to the table.
Want to put it on pause and want to say, shut it down.